On a crisp evening in Oram, Utah, thousands of young conservatives gathered at Utah Valley University, ready to be inspired by a man who had become a symbol of their fight for America's future. Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, was there as part of his American Comeback Tour, a rally meant to energize students, to light the fire of patriotism, and to remind them that the spirit of freedom was alive and unshakable. He spoke with passion, tackling the hard questions of our day: transgender policies, attacks on faith, the erosion of traditional values, always fearless, always unapologetic. But then, in an instant, that energy turned to chaos. A sharp crack tore through the air, a sound no one could mistake. The crowd gasped. Cameras caught the horrific moment Kirk jerked in his seat, struck in the neck by a sniper's bullet fired from nearly 200 yards away. Screams filled the auditorium as students scattered, diving for cover. Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz, who had been there in the audience, later described the terror, the confusion, the disbelief. Charlie was rushed away, fighting for his life, but the wound was devastating. News outlets like the New York Post first reported he was in grave condition. Minutes felt like hours. Conservatives across the country held their breath, praying, waiting for word. And then the news came. Charlie Kirk had passed. America had lost one of her boldest voices. But why? Who could possibly want to silence a man whose mission was to awaken the next generation to love their country? That answer would come later, but in that moment, one thing was clear. This was not just an attack on Charlie Kirk. It was an attack on what he represented: faith, freedom, and the courage to speak the truth. And as the nation reeled, leaders across the political spectrum began to respond. But one voice, one ally, stood above the rest. When the tragic confirmation of Charlie Kirk's passing reached the public, America didn't have to wait long to hear from the man who had fought shoulder to shoulder with him in the battle for this nation's soul: President Donald J. Trump. In words that shook social media, Trump posted on X, "The great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead." No one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie. He was loved and admired by all, especially me. And now he is no longer with us. Melania and my sympathies go out to his beautiful wife, Erica, and family. Charlie, we love you. It wasn't just a statement. It was a personal cry of grief. For years, Charlie Kirk had been more than an ally to the president. He was a bridge to America's next generation. Through Turning Point USA, Kirk built a movement that packed auditoriums, campuses, and arenas with young people who were tired of being told to sit down and stay quiet. Trump saw that, embraced it, and together they gave young conservatives a home. The tribute was raw, heartfelt, and unmistakably Trump. Breitbart, Newsmax, and Fox News amplified the message, reminding viewers that this was no ordinary friendship. This was respect, born out of shared battles, of mutual understanding, and of one mission: to keep America free. But the grief wasn't limited to conservative circles. Senator Mike Lee, standing for Utah and for faith, urged Americans to pray, not just for Charlie's family, but for a country now deprived of one of its fiercest defenders. Even voices across the aisle, though stunned and reluctant, condemned the violence. And yet, amid that wave of mourning, a darker current began to show. Not everyone saw Charlie Kirk's death as a tragedy. Some in the media couldn't resist twisting the narrative, and their words revealed something sinister about how far bias can go in times of national heartbreak. As America grieved, millions expected unity. They expected a moment of silence, of respect for a man who had just lost his life while speaking to young patriots about the values that built this country. But instead, a chilling example of bias cut through the airwaves. On MSNBC, a guest speculated, without evidence, without logic, that perhaps the shot that struck Charlie Kirk came from a supporter firing in celebration. Celebration? A sniper's bullet from 200 yards away, aimed precisely at a man on stage, written off as some twisted form of cheer? Even as videos clearly showed Kirk jerking his seat from a targeted strike, the network let the word stand. The outrage was immediate. The New York Post slammed the coverage in a blistering editorial, pointing out the insensitivity, the distortion, and the sheer disrespect of such a claim. Conservative voices across the spectrum called it out for what it was: a refusal to grant dignity to a man whose politics they despised. It was a moment that showed the stakes. If the media could spin something so grave, what wouldn't they try to spin? While Breitbart and Newsmax poured out tributes and calls for justice, left-wing commentators debated theories that ignored the facts. The long range, the precision, the chaos eyewitnesses described. But the truth was far simpler. This wasn't celebratory gunfire. This was a deliberate act of violence against one of the most influential conservative leaders of our time. And soon, law enforcement would make that fact undeniable, because the shooter wasn't just a shadow in the distance anymore. A suspect was in custody. By midday, clarity began to pierce through the fog of speculation. Fox News confirmed what many had been waiting to hear. A suspect was in custody. The man accused of firing the fatal shot at Charlie Kirk was no longer free. The investigation was moving fast, with federal and state authorities converging on Oram to uncover the truth. Jason Chaffetz, who had lived through the chaos inside Utah Valley University, went on air to recount the terror of that moment. His voice, steady but heavy, reminded viewers how fragile safety feels when the unthinkable happens in a place meant for ideas, debate, and inspiration. Chaffetz painted a vivid picture. Thousands of students gathered, Charlie shaking hands and fist-bumping supporters, the energy electric, and then a single shot silencing it all. Details on the suspect's motives remain under wraps. Fox sources whispered early theories of a political grudge, though investigators have not confirmed. What is clear is this: no story of celebration fits the facts. This was precision. A sniper-like shot from 200 yards away, timed during a fiery exchange on cultural issues, designed to end a voice mid-sentence. For conservatives, the arrest was a relief, but not a closure. A question still loomed like a storm over the movement. Was this the act of a lone, twisted individual, or part of something larger, a culture that fuels hatred against those who dare to stand up for faith, for tradition, for America itself? The investigation continues, but even as facts come to light, the legacy of Charlie Kirk, the man they tried to silence, was already louder than ever. And it's in that legacy that his true power is revealed. Charlie Kirk was never just another commentator. He was a builder, a fighter, and above all, a believer. At just 18, he founded Turning Point USA, a scrappy startup that grew into one of the most powerful conservative youth movements in history. What began as a mission to fight liberal dominance on college campuses became a nationwide force, drawing in millions of young Americans who refused to be silenced. At Utah Valley University that night, before the chaos, you could feel the impact of his work. Students lined up for hours, waving flags, snapping photos, eager for a moment to shake his hand. Kirk didn't just give speeches, he connected. He fist-bumped fans, he smiled, he reminded them they weren't alone in a culture that often tells them their values are outdated or unwelcome. He was bold in ways others weren't willing to be. When he challenged transgender policies, he didn't couch his words. When he defended faith, he did it with conviction. His voice was sharp, his arguments clear, and his courage contagious. That courage made him a target, yes, but it also made him a hero. Republicans across the country are already calling him irreplaceable. Breitbart highlights how Kirk mobilized Gen Z Republicans like no one else. Newsmax reminds us that he filled stadiums in ways few conservatives could. And President Trump himself made it clear. Charlie Kirk had the heart of the youth. The bullet may have ended his life, but it cannot end his influence. The thousands who sat in that auditorium and the millions who followed him online now carry a responsibility. The movement he built is bigger than one man, and his loss is a challenge to all of us. Will we step up? Will we keep fighting? In the hours after Charlie Kirk's death was confirmed, America watched a wave of responses pour in. Senator Mike Lee of Utah, visibly shaken, urged the nation to join him in prayer for Charlie's family, for his wife Erica, and for a movement left without its leader. Across social media, conservatives posted tributes, sharing clips of Kirk's fiery speeches, photos from Turning Point rallies, and personal testimonies of how he gave them the courage to stand for their beliefs. But what made this moment different was the rare spark of bipartisan outrage. Even lawmakers who sparred with Kirk in life condemned the act of political violence. The White House released a statement calling for unity and prayer, acknowledging that disagreement should never, ever lead to bloodshed. For a brief moment, the country remembered something it too often forgets. that beneath the battles, we are still one nation. Still, conservatives couldn't ignore the pattern. Charlie Kirk was bold, he was relentless, and he was unafraid to challenge the left's most sacred talking points. That courage won him admiration, but it also made him a lightning rod. Many on the right are now asking, did a culture of hostility against outspoken conservatives help fuel this attack? While answers remain uncertain, what is undeniable is the power of Kirk's example. He lived as he preached, courageously, patriotically, unapologetically. And now the question echoes, how do we honor a man whose life was spent in the trenches of America's culture war? The answer, as the next hours would show, would come not only from leaders and commentators, but from the very young people he dedicated his life to. As news of Charlie Kirk's death spread across college campuses and conservative circles online, something remarkable began to happen. Students who once sat quietly in classrooms, afraid to speak up, suddenly found their voices. They posted clips of Kirk's debates, quotes from his speeches, and personal stories of how he told them they had the right to believe in God, to love their country, to defend freedom without apology. On Turning Point USA's channels, tributes flooded in. Young conservatives declared they would carry the torch Charlie lit. They vowed that the movement he started at 18 would not die with him. It would grow stronger. Rallies are already being planned in his honor, with thousands expected to attend. What the sniper tried to extinguish has only ignited more. Charlie's impact wasn't just in the headlines, it was in the quiet moments. The student who shook his hand and decided to run for campus office, the young woman who stopped hiding her faith, the veteran who felt his sacrifice was respected again. That was Kirk's gift. He didn't just talk about America's future. He built it, one person at a time. And now with his passing, that future rests in the hands of those he inspired. They are not retreating. They are not hiding. They are standing taller, louder, prouder. In death as in life, Charlie Kirk is proving what he always believed. One voice can change everything. But as the youth rise, the nation still mourns. And the final word in this story isn't about loss. It's about legacy. Charlie Kirk's voice has been silenced, but his message echoes louder than ever. He gave his life doing exactly what he was called to do, speaking truth to a generation hungry for leadership. His passing is a tragedy, yes, but it is also a charge to every American who still believes in freedom, faith, and country. President Trump's tribute called him legendary. Breitbart called him irreplaceable, and students across this nation are calling him their inspiration. These aren't empty words. They are the measure of a man who dedicated his short years to ensuring that the conservative flame would never go out. The investigation will continue. Justice will be sought. But no verdict, no sentence can undo what Charlie Kirk built. The sniper's bullet could not silence his cause. If anything, it has magnified it, uniting conservatives under a single banner, that America's values are worth defending, no matter the cost. So tonight, as we close this chapter, we do so not in despair, but in determination. Because Charlie Kirk was not just a fighter, he was a symbol of resilience, and symbols live on. To his wife Erica, to his family, to the students he loved, and to every American who now feels this loss, take heart. The work continues. The torch has been passed. The mission endures. Charlie Kirk may be gone from this earth, but his spirit, his passion for a freer, prouder America will never die.